In the dim light of a foreign dawn, Captain Elias Calder's fate was sealed. His boots hit the damp ground of Arcanus V, the jungle planet known for its ruthless predators and impenetrable foliage. Exiled. The council had cast him out, branding him as a rebel, a threat to their fragile system. He was guilty of nothing more than uncovering truths they wished to keep buried. Now, with nothing but basic supplies and a blade, he stood alone, surrounded by towering trees that seemed to stretch endlessly into a sky he'd never seen before. The oppressive heat hit him first. Thick, humid air clung to him like a second skin, laced with the pungent scent of decay and alien life. Every breath felt heavy, dense with the atmosphere of a planet that did not welcome him. This world, he knew, was designed to be his end. He was meant to disappear here, consumed by the jungle's fierce inhabitants, and never to be seen again. But Elias was no ordinary man. He was a soldier, a survivor, and he had no intention of giving up. With a steadying breath, Elias adjusted the worn pack on his shoulder and took his first step into the heart of the jungle. The dense undergrowth resisted him at every turn. Vines snaked along the ground, wrapping around his ankles, and thorny bushes tore at his sleeves. Each step seemed to announce his presence, snapping twigs and rustling leaves, a cacophony of noise in a world that thrived on silence. As he pushed deeper, he began to sense the eyes of hidden creatures tracking him. Small, glimmering orbs peered out from the shadows, reflecting an intelligence that unsettled him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, not by one creature, but by many. Each rustle in the foliage, each subtle shift in the light, hinted at movement too coordinated to be mere beasts. Elias tightened his grip on his blade, his senses sharpened, prepared for whatever lurked beyond the thick trees. Night came quickly on Arcanus V, casting the jungle into a pitch darkness unlike anything Elias had experienced. Even the smallest star was hidden by the towering canopy, and he relied only on the faint glow of his emergency beacon to make out his surroundings. Exhausted from hours of relentless trekking, he found a hollow between the roots of an ancient tree and settled in, letting his mind go numb against the oppressive quiet. But as the jungle fell silent, an eerie sound pierced the night, a soft, melodic hum, almost like a chant carried by the wind. It was close, too close. Heart-pounding, he gripped his blade and peered into the darkness. In the faint glow of his beacon, shadows began to take form, slender and graceful, blending seamlessly with the forest around them. They moved as one, in silent steps that barely disturbed the ground, circling him like predators, but with an elegance that seemed almost ritualistic. Then, out of the shadows, a figure emerged, a woman, her skin an ethereal shade of green, eyes large and reflective, framed by intricate patterns that seemed painted by the jungle itself. She was tall, her movements fluid as if she were part of the foliage around her. Elias held his breath, instinctively knowing that any sudden movement might be perceived as a threat. The woman extended a hand, palm up, her gaze locked onto his. Though her expression was unreadable, her presence radiated authority, curiosity, and something deeper, a silent invitation. Elias lowered his blade slowly, a show of trust. In response, she nodded slightly and gestured for him to follow her. Despite his instincts screaming otherwise, he felt an overwhelming urge to obey. After all, he had little choice. Alone, he wouldn't last a week in this jungle. But with them, maybe, just maybe, survival was within reach. As he took his first steps behind the woman, deeper into the jungle, Elias realized that he was about to enter a world unlike any he'd ever known. The tribe of these beautiful, Amazonian beings was more than mere inhabitants of Arcanus V. They were its guardians, its soul, and they had chosen to reveal themselves to him for reasons he could not yet fathom. And as he followed her, he couldn't shake the feeling that his journey was just beginning. Whatever awaited him in the depths of this alien jungle, it was bound to change him forever. Elias followed in silence as the woman led him through the jungle, her steps so light they barely left a trace. She was joined by two others, each as striking and silent as shadows. They moved with the precision of a practiced unit, signaling to each other with glances and slight gestures Elias couldn't decipher. Their path wound through dense foliage, over twisted roots, and beneath towering trees whose canopies formed a green, impenetrable ceiling. They walked for what felt like hours, the only sound the soft rustling of leaves underfoot and the distant calls of strange creatures. The path opened up, and Elias found himself standing at the edge of a vast, hidden settlement woven into the very fabric of the jungle. Dwellings made from giant, hollowed-out trees spiraled upward, connected by bridges crafted from vines and branches. The village glowed faintly in the dim light, as if each structure was alive with bioluminescent flora. The air was rich with scents Elias couldn't identify, a mixture of fragrant herbs, damp earth, and the subtle undertones of unfamiliar flowers. As they entered the village, heads turned. Tall, graceful figures, men, women, and children alike, paused in their routines to study him, their wide, reflective eyes filled with curiosity and wariness. The silence was almost reverent, a shared understanding among the tribe that this moment was unusual, perhaps unprecedented. Elias's escort, whom he had come to think of as the leader, gestured for him to sit on a woven mat near the base of an immense tree at the heart of the village. A hush fell over the tribe as they formed a circle around him. The leader, her face painted with symbols Elias didn't recognize, spoke in a language he couldn't understand. Her voice was low, melodic, and carried an undeniable authority. She gestured to herself, tapping her chest as though introducing herself. Elias nodded, repeating her gesture, and introduced himself in kind. "Elias," he said, watching her expression closely. She tilted her head, considering, before repeating his name with a slight, respectful nod. He felt a strange sense of relief at the small connection, as if a bridge had been formed between their vastly different worlds. In a series of signals, the leader motioned for him to stand, guiding him through the village. As they walked, she pointed out various plants, animals, and structures, explaining each with gestures and sounds that seemed to mirror the essence of the things she described. Elias observed, fascinated, taking in the depth of their relationship with the jungle. He saw tradespeople collecting vibrant herbs and placing them in bundles, grinding roots into paste, and crafting tools from bone and stone. Every action seemed to be part of a ritual, a practice steeped in respect for their environment. After a while, Elias found himself at a clearing surrounded by ancient trees marked with carvings. The leader gestured to the carvings, running her fingers over the intricate designs as if sharing a secret. He realized that the symbols depicted the history of the tribe, stories of survival and triumph, of conflicts and peace with the jungle. Though he couldn't understand the language, the symbols seemed to speak to him, telling tales of resilience and unity. One particular symbol caught his attention, a depiction of an outsider, a figure unlike the others, with distinct features that reminded him of himself. He stared, captivated, as the leader's voice softened, almost reverent, as she traced the symbol with a finger. This figure was not of their kind, yet held a place of honor within the story. The weight of it sank in. This was not the first time an outsider had come to them. And perhaps, just perhaps, he was not entirely alone in his fate. The leader, sensing his reaction, placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture of assurance. She spoke a single word, one he didn't understand, but somehow felt. It resonated within him, filling him with a strange comfort that softened the sharp edges of his exile. As night fell, and the village glowed with the soft light of bioluminescent plants, Elias realized that his journey on Arcanus V had taken a turn he hadn't anticipated. The tribe had taken him in, shared their world, and hinted at a history that seemed to connect with his own in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. Whatever role he was meant to play in their story, or they in his, remained a mystery. For the first time since his exile, he felt a glimmer of hope. Days turned into weeks as Elias settled into life among the tribe. Each dawn brought new lessons, new discoveries about the jungle and the people who thrived within it. Though they were still wary of him, the tribe gradually began to accept his presence. The leader, who had introduced herself as Kayla, took particular interest in teaching him their ways. She guided him through the jungle, teaching him to recognize edible plants, spot hidden dangers, and understand the complex rhythms of Arcanus 5. In return, Elias shared fragments of his own world, tracing simple diagrams in the dirt to explain the starships that traveled the galaxy and the towering cities he once called home. Kayla watched intently, her eyes flickering with curiosity. Though she asked few questions, Elias sensed that their language, rich in gestures and subtle sounds, held meanings that transcended words. Every shared look, every nod and touch, conveyed more than any spoken language could. One evening, as they sat by a communal fire surrounded by villagers, Elias noticed a young boy struggling to lift a large basket of gathered herbs. Without hesitation, he rose and took the basket, easily hoisting it onto his shoulder and carrying it to the women who were preparing medicines. The tribespeople exchanged glances, some murmuring softly, impressed by his quiet act of kindness. That night, Kayla approached him, her expression thoughtful. She pointed to her chest, then to him, and spoke a single word that sounded like Laya. She repeated it, tapping her heart, then motioned to him again. He understood it as a term of trust, a sign that they saw him as part of their world, if only in a small way. With a nod, Elias tapped his own chest and repeated, Laya. As time passed, Elias became more deeply integrated into the tribe. He learned their hunting techniques, joining groups of warriors who moved through the jungle like shadows, silent and precise. Though he was clumsier than the seasoned hunters, they respected his strength and determination, often sharing tips on how to improve his stealth. He became skilled at navigating the dense undergrowth, his movements no longer disrupting the natural harmony of the jungle. One night, however, the peace was shattered. A piercing scream echoed through the trees, followed by the heavy rustling of undergrowth. As villagers rushed to the source, Elias joined the crowd, heart pounding, to find a young woman injured, her leg caught in the snapping jaws of a strange, serpentine creature with shimmering scales. It lay coiled around her, hissing as it tightened its grip. Without a second thought, Elias drew his blade and lunged forward, striking the creature with swift, practiced precision. The serpent recoiled, releasing its hold just long enough for him to lift the woman to safety. As he backed away, the creature slithered off into the darkness, its eerie, glittering eyes fixed on him. The villagers were silent, their faces a mix of shock and awe. No one had dared face the creatures of Arcanus 5 so boldly. The young woman's family approached, thanking him with bows and murmurs of gratitude, and Kayla placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression unreadable but filled with a newfound respect. That night, they held a gathering in his honor, offering him a place at the fire among the elders and leaders of the tribe. Kayla presented him with a necklace crafted from vines and stones, a symbol of the tribe's acceptance. She called him Taran, a title given to one who protected others. Though he did not yet fully understand the meaning of his new title, he felt its weight and significance. He had not simply been accepted, he had earned a place within their community, a bond forged not by blood, but by loyalty and trust. The jungle no longer seemed as hostile, and the tribe no longer regarded him as an outsider. They had become his family in this alien world. And as he sat by the fire, feeling the warmth of their acceptance, Elias knew that his exile had transformed into something far greater than survival. He was part of a story now, a story written in the jungle's shadows and in the whispered names of those who had come before him. Elias had begun to feel a deep sense of belonging in the tribe, yet he knew little of the forces that bound them to this world. Kayla had hinted at ancient secrets, legends that connected their people to Arcanus 5 in ways that transcended mere survival. As he settled into his role among them, Elias grew more curious about these secrets, sensing that they held the key to understanding his own fate. One afternoon, Kayla approached him and motioned for him to follow. She led him to a part of the jungle he hadn't seen before, a grove of trees whose trunks were twisted and marked with intricate carvings. Symbols adorned every branch and root, worn smooth by time yet still striking in their detail. Kayla explained that this place was sacred, a record of the tribe's history and their bond with the jungle. Elias listened as she described the carvings, gesturing to specific symbols and explaining their meanings with careful reverence. She pointed to a figure that represented the jungle itself, a towering form with arms spread wide, embracing the land. Beside it was the symbol of the tribe, a circle that encompassed the figure, as if they were one and the same. Then she pointed to another symbol, a figure that resembled Elias, or rather, any outsider. This figure was surrounded by a different set of symbols, strange, angular shapes that seemed foreign and out of place among the others. Kayla's tone grew somber as she explained that long ago, another like him had arrived. He was a wanderer, a seeker from the stars. Much like Elias, the tribe had taken him in, as they had with Elias, and he had become one of them. Elias felt a chill as she continued, her voice soft and serious. The outsider had been accepted, but his presence had disrupted the balance of the jungle. Creatures once passive had grown aggressive, plants that once healed had withered, and the tribe had faced suffering unlike anything they had known before. It was only when the outsider left, venturing into the heart of the jungle, never to return, that the natural order had been restored. Kayla looked at him with an intensity that conveyed her meaning without words. History had a way of repeating itself. She did not say it outright, but Elias understood. His presence might disrupt the delicate balance they had worked so hard to preserve. The jungle was alive, aware, and perhaps wary of intruders. Determined to prove his worth, Elias sought ways to honor the tribe's traditions. He joined them in their rituals, learned their prayers, and observed the deep respect they held for every life form around them. He noticed the way they took only what they needed, how they treated each plant and animal with a reverence that bordered on worship. Over time, he began to feel the jungle responding to him, as if recognizing his intention to coexist rather than conquer. One evening, as the tribe gathered around the sacred fire, an elder began to tell stories of the old ways. Elias listened intently, captivated by the tales of ancient alliances with the jungle's creatures, of past leaders who had forged bonds with beings he could scarcely imagine. These beings were protectors, guardians of the land, and they had chosen to align themselves with the tribe, sensing the harmony they cultivated. As he absorbed these stories, Elias began to see the jungle not as an adversary, but as a living entity, one that demanded respect and understanding. He realized that his fate was tied to this place in ways he had not foreseen. He was not here by accident. He was part of a story far older than his exile, one that had been waiting for him to take his place. But his acceptance did not come without sacrifice. The jungle tested him, pushing him to his limits in ways that challenged every skill he possessed. There were days when he found himself face to face with creatures that defied logic, their forms blending seamlessly with the foliage, their eyes reflecting a wisdom and wariness that matched his own. Each encounter left him shaken but resolute, determined to prove himself worthy of the trust the tribe had placed in him. One night, after a particularly harrowing encounter with a creature the tribe called the Veil Serpent, a massive, shadowy serpent that seemed to vanish and reappear at will, Elias returned to the village, exhausted but triumphant. Kayla greeted him at the edge of the settlement, her face softened with a rare smile. She reached out, placing her hand over his heart, a gesture of deep respect. For the first time, he felt truly seen, accepted not just as a member of the tribe, but as a protector of their way of life. As he lay beneath the stars that night, Elias felt a strange sense of peace. His exile had brought him to this world, but his journey had transformed him. He was no longer simply a man cast aside by his own people. He was part of something greater, something ancient and sacred, woven into the fabric of the jungle itself. And in that quiet moment, He realized that the jungle had claimed him as its own. Elias awoke to a stillness in the air, an unsettling calm that settled over the village. The usual morning sounds, the chirping of strange birds, the soft rustling of leaves, were absent, leaving a silence that felt almost ominous. He noticed the tribe moving quietly, their faces tense as they exchanged looks of concern. Something was wrong, something beyond the ordinary rhythms of the jungle. Kayla approached him, her face grave, and gestured for him to follow. She led him through the village and down a winding path, deeper into the jungle than they had ever ventured together. As they walked, she explained in hushed tones about the spirit of the jungle, a presence that protected the tribe, but also demanded balance and respect. When this balance was disrupted, the spirit would reveal itself, not as a guide, but as a force of nature that required appeasement. Elias listened, a chill creeping up his spine. Kayla's words painted a picture of a jungle that was more than alive. It was a sentient, watchful entity, aware of every action within its borders. This spirit, she explained, had appeared only once in her lifetime, and its presence had signaled a period of great hardship. The tribe had narrowly survived, learning hard lessons about the jungle's need for respect and harmony. The deeper they went, the denser the jungle became, until the trees formed a dark canopy overhead, shutting out the light. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. Every step felt like a descent into the unknown, a journey into the very heart of the jungle spirit. They arrived at a clearing surrounded by towering trees, each one marked with symbols and offerings. Stones, feathers, and carved figures adorned the area, remnants of past tributes. At the center of the clearing stood a large ancient tree, its bark twisted and darkened with age, its roots sprawling outward like the fingers of an enormous hand reaching into the earth. Kayla knelt before the tree, and Elias followed suit, sensing the gravity of the moment. Kayla placed her hands on the ground, muttering words Elias didn't understand. She motioned for him to do the same, guiding his hands to press against the earth. A strange warmth pulsed beneath his palms, as if the very soil held a heartbeat. He could feel something stirring, a presence that defied logic and yet felt undeniably real. As they knelt in silence, the jungle around them seemed to come alive. Shadows moved at the edges of his vision, shapes that shifted and danced, forming patterns that were both beautiful and terrifying. The ground beneath them trembled, a faint vibration that grew steadily stronger. Elias fought the urge to pull away, to break the connection, but Kayla's steady gaze kept him rooted in place. Suddenly, a figure appeared, emerging from the shadows between the trees. It was a creature unlike anything Elias had ever seen. Tall and slender, its skin dark and textured like bark, with eyes that glowed a haunting green. It moved with a grace that defied its size, each step silent, purposeful, the spirit of the jungle. Elias's breath caught as the spirit approached, its eyes fixed on him. He felt a pressure in his mind, a presence probing, as if assessing his very soul. The sensation was overwhelming, a mixture of fear and awe that left him paralyzed. He could feel its thoughts, a vast and ancient consciousness that held knowledge beyond his comprehension. Kayla remained silent, her head bowed, and Elias understood that this was his test. The spirit was measuring him, evaluating his worthiness, his intentions. He held its gaze, steadying his thoughts, letting his mind reach out with a silent promise of respect, of harmony, of a desire to protect rather than conquer. The spirit extended a hand, its fingers long and delicate, tipped with what looked like claws made of stone. Slowly, Elias reached out, his hand trembling as it met the spirit's. The moment their hands touched, a surge of energy flowed through him, a torrent of memories, visions, feelings that spanned eons. He saw the jungle as it had been, untouched and pristine, the tribe's ancestors arriving and forging a bond, the hardships they had endured, and the delicate balance they had achieved. The spirit released him, and the connection faded, leaving Elias breathless. drained yet filled with a strange clarity. The spirit's gaze softened, a flicker of approval passing through its eyes before it turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving the clearing as silent as before. Kayla looked at him, a smile of pride on her face. She placed a hand over her heart, a gesture he had come to understand as the highest form of respect. Elias returned the gesture, feeling a profound sense of belonging that transcended words. The jungle had accepted him, acknowledged him as part of its story, its spirit. As they made their way back to the village, Elias felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He was no longer a stranger, an outsider merely surviving in an alien land. He was a guardian, a protector of the balance that held this world together. And as he walked beneath the ancient trees, he knew that his purpose was no longer tied to the past he had left behind, but to the life he had found in the heart of the jungle. As the days passed, Elias felt the full weight of his role within the tribe. He was no longer simply surviving. He was protecting, preserving, and learning from the jungle. But this newfound peace was soon threatened by a disturbance, one that would test his loyalty to the tribe and to the jungle itself. It began with strange sightings. Hunters reported seeing shadows moving in unnatural ways, shapes that didn't belong, and flashes of light in the distance. Rumors spread through the village, whispers of intruders, outsiders who had breached the borders of their sacred land. Kayla and the elders grew tense, their faces lined with worry as they convened, discussing the signs and what they might mean. Elias's heart sank. The only outsiders he knew of were those from his own world, the same people who had exiled him. Had they come here to track him down, or worse, to claim the jungle's resources? His mind raced with possibilities, each one darker than the last. But he knew that, whatever their reason, their presence posed a threat to the tribe and the delicate balance they had worked so hard to protect. One evening, Kayla approached him with a solemn expression. She explained that they had detected the outsiders' encampment deep within the jungle. Their equipment had left scars on the land, trampled plants, and frightened animals, a sign of their disregard for the jungle spirit. The tribe was preparing to confront them, but Kayla wanted Elias to be the one to approach them first. As someone who understood both worlds, she believed he could find a way to resolve the situation without violence. Elias agreed, feeling a mix of dread and determination. He couldn't abandon the tribe to face this threat alone. They had taken him in, given him a new life, and he owed them his loyalty. With Kayla's blessing, he set out into the jungle, moving swiftly yet carefully, his senses attuned to every sound, every shift in the air. As he neared the outsiders' camp, he saw signs of their presence: discarded wrappers, a broken branch, and faint footprints in the mud. His pulse quickened as he approached, spotting the metallic glint of their equipment amidst the greenery. A small team of soldiers, outfitted with advanced gear, stood around a campfire, their expressions weary yet alert. He recognized the uniforms immediately. They were from his homeworld. Taking a deep breath, Elias stepped out of the shadows, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. The soldiers turned, their eyes widening in shock as they recognized him. One of them, a lieutenant he had served with, stared in disbelief. "Calder, is that really you?" The lieutenant asked, his voice a mixture of surprise and suspicion. "We thought you were dead." "I might as well be," Elias replied, his tone calm but firm. "I found a new life here, one that doesn't involve disrupting the balance of this world." "Why are you here?" The lieutenant glanced at his comrades before answering. "We were sent to scout this planet, assess its resources. Command received reports that it's rich in rare minerals, plants with medicinal properties, things we could use. They didn't expect to find anyone here, especially not you." Elias felt a surge of anger, but kept his expression steady. "This world is protected. The people who live here have a connection to the jungle you can't begin to understand. If you interfere, you'll only bring harm to them and to yourselves." The lieutenant's face hardened. "We have our orders, Calder. You know how it is. We're not here to negotiate. We're here to secure resources. If the natives get in the way..." He trailed off, the unspoken threat hanging in the air. Elias took a step forward, his voice low but resolute. "These people are my family now. If you harm them, I will defend them with everything I have." The lieutenant hesitated, taken aback by the intensity in Elias's eyes. The other soldiers exchanged uncertain glances, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. They had not expected to face one of their own, much less someone so fiercely loyal to an alien tribe. For a tense moment, silence hung between them. Then the lieutenant sighed, his gaze softening slightly. "Look, Calder, I don't want this to turn into a fight. Maybe there's a way we can do this without causing a conflict." Elias seized the opportunity, sensing a sliver of hope. He explained the jungle's balance, the importance of preserving its resources, and the risks of disrupting an ecosystem that had sustained the tribe for generations. He spoke of the spirit of the jungle, describing it not as a myth, but as a real presence that would defend its land. After a long pause, the lieutenant nodded reluctantly. "Fine. We'll report back. Say the planet's too hostile for mining. But if command sends more, we can't stop them." Elias nodded in gratitude. "Thank you. That's all I ask." The soldiers packed up their equipment, their expressions wary but resigned. As they departed, Elias watched them go, feeling a strange mix of relief and sorrow. He had bridged the gap between two worlds, but he knew that his loyalty was now firmly with the tribe. When he returned to the village, Kayla was waiting for him. She listened as he recounted the encounter, her face softening with gratitude. She placed her hand on his shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of the sacrifice he had made. The tribe gathered around him, and for the first time, Elias felt truly at peace. He had chosen his path, and he had found his purpose. His loyalty to the jungle, to the tribe, was unbreakable, and he knew that he would protect this world with everything he had. As night fell, Elias sat by the fire, surrounded by his new family, his heart filled with a quiet strength. He was no longer an exile, no longer alone. He was part of something far greater than himself, a guardian of a world that had given him a second chance. The days that followed were filled with a sense of calm that felt almost sacred. The jungle seemed to breathe easier, its dense canopy whispering its gratitude to those who listened. The tribe had returned to their routines, gathering herbs, hunting, and continuing their lives as guardians of Arcanus 5. But for Elias, something had shifted irreversibly. He had chosen his path, pledged his loyalty, and cemented his place among the people who had once been strangers. One evening, as the sun cast a golden light over the village, Kayla called for a gathering. The entire tribe assembled around the central fire, their faces illuminated in the flickering glow. Kayla stood at the center, holding an object wrapped in cloth. With reverence, she unwrapped it, revealing a carved pendant made from a rare stone only found deep within the jungle's core. She raised the pendant high, her voice clear and steady as she spoke to the tribe. Elias didn't need to understand every word to know what was happening. This was a ceremony, a rite of passage that marked his acceptance not just as one of them, but as a protector, a leader. Kayla placed the pendant around his neck, her hands lingering for a moment as she looked into his eyes, conveying a silent bond of respect and gratitude. The tribe erupted in cheers, chanting a word he had come to recognize. Taran, protector. Elias felt a wave of emotion wash over him, a mixture of pride, humility, and a profound sense of belonging. He had found his family, his purpose, and his home. For the first time in his life, he felt truly free, not bound by orders or politics, but by a responsibility he had chosen for himself. As the night wore on, the village celebrated, their laughter and music filling the air, blending with the sounds of the jungle. Elias joined them, laughing, dancing, and sharing in their joy. The weight of his exile, the bitterness of betrayal, all of it seemed to dissolve, leaving only the present moment, a moment he would carry with him forever. But the peace was not to last. Early the next morning, a distant rumble shattered the tranquility. The sound of engines filled the air, growing louder by the second. The tribe gathered, their faces painted with worry as they looked to the sky, where a massive shadow appeared, descending toward the jungle. Elias's heart sank. The military had returned, this time with a larger force, likely a response to the initial team's report. They had not given up on the resources that lay hidden in the jungle's depths, and they were coming to claim them, by force if necessary. Kayla turned to him, her eyes sharp and unyielding. This was the moment he had feared, the moment he would have to choose between his past and his future, between survival and sacrifice. But Elias knew there was no choice to make. He would defend his family, his home, and the jungle with everything he had. He gathered the warriors, instructing them in the tactics he had learned as a soldier. They prepared traps, using the jungle to their advantage, creating barriers and ambush points that would hinder the soldiers' progress. The tribe moved with swift precision, every movement coordinated and purposeful. The jungle, too, seemed to respond, as if recognizing the threat to its peace. When the soldiers arrived, they found themselves navigating a hostile terrain, their every step watched by unseen eyes. Elias observed from a hidden vantage point, directing the tribe's defenses as the soldiers struggled to make headway. Despite their advanced technology, they were no match for the jungle's fury. Vines tangled around their legs, unseen roots tripped them, and creatures emerged from the shadows, startling them and driving them deeper into confusion. But the soldiers were relentless, pressing forward with grim determination. Elias knew that they would not stop until they reached the heart of the jungle, where the tribe's sacred land lay. With a heavy heart, he stepped out of hiding, calling out to the soldiers to face him. The lieutenant, leading the charge, recognized him and hesitated. "Calder," the lieutenant shouted, his voice filled with frustration. "Step aside. We have orders." "I can't do that," Elias replied, his voice steady and unwavering. "This place is under my protection now. Turn back before it's too late." The lieutenant's face hardened. "We're not leaving without what we came for." Elias took a deep breath, his resolve unshaken. "Then you leave me no choice." With a swift motion, he signaled to the tribe, who unleashed their final wave of defenses. The jungle came alive around them, vines and roots twisting and binding, trees swaying as if moved by unseen hands. The soldiers, overwhelmed by the jungle's wrath, began to retreat, their ranks breaking as they fled back to their ships. The lieutenant cast one last look at Elias, a mixture of respect and resentment in his eyes, before following his men. As the engines roared to life, the soldiers' ships lifted off, disappearing into the sky. Elias watched them go, feeling a sense of closure settle over him. His past had come back to haunt him, but he had faced it head-on and emerged victorious. When he returned to the village, the tribe welcomed him back with open arms, their faces filled with gratitude. Kayla approached him, placing her hand over his heart, a gesture of profound respect and trust. Elias knew that he had earned his place among them, not just as a protector, but as family. As the days turned to months, Elias became an integral part of the tribe. He shared his knowledge, learned their ways, and together they forged a bond that was as strong as the jungle itself. The spirit of the jungle, too, seemed to acknowledge him, its presence a constant, silent guardian that watched over them all. In time, the memory of his exile faded, replaced by a life filled with purpose, community, and love. He had found not only a home but a legacy that would endure, woven into the heart of the jungle, forever. And as he looked out over the vast, unending landscape of Arcanus 5, Elias felt a profound peace, knowing that he was exactly where he was meant to be.